Hello everyone, my name is Tricky Technician, and welcome to a video I've wanted to do for quite a long time. As you are all aware, I play Overwatch. A lot. And as such, I wanted to give the character I play the most the attention I feel he deserves rather than the attention he gets. Who is that hero, you may ask? Well, none other than the powerful pansexual, the elegant, the Rizmaster himself, Lifeweaver. I chose Lifeweaver not only due to him being my main, but because unfortunately the picture the community has painted on Lifeweaver isn't true to the actual amazing product we got, and most of the stigma is left from his poor perception on release, as well as the general poor outlook on what he's supposed to do. Let's start by first talking about the most surface level things about him, being his design, as well as his animations, and really get a good look on the amazing effort and attention to detail put in on most fronts of his character. Starting with his character design, let's go from head to toe and observe how this man is put together. To start, we can see that he has very chiseled features on his face, as well as having defined cheeks and luscious lips. His hair is very neatly groomed and is styled around these tube-like structures that seem to meet in the back where his hair is tied. Moving on to his body, we can see the white continues into his shirt, while his actual body is built in what can best be described as a himbo or twunk archetype. He proudly has his chest on display, but not in the way like many other male characters have it, which I will get into later. But just keep that in mind. And he has a pretty small waist compared to most men in the roster. His arms are both different than what you would expect, one being the Vishkar arm, which is brass normally, but gold due to my golden gun. The other arm is sort of normal, it's a bit on the muscular end, but nothing like Torb's, Ryan's, or even Baptiste. However, more interestingly, his human arm even has robotics built into it, but not quite to the extent of the Vishkar arm. Lines can be seen going down the hand and even to the fingernails, indicating that perhaps there's more mechanisms to Lifeweaver than initially thought. And of course we can't talk about his body without mentioning the spinning flower on the back, as well as the dainty pink petals that float behind his tall figure. These petals have lights that flow, showing their texture occasionally, showing small flowers and lines that line the design. These being the only pink elements on his body is actually quite perfect, as when we get into his animations, you'll see that most of his particle effects and constructs are pink, which is where the elegant pink said from the devs come into his color scheme. Lifeweaver's bottom half consists of garments that reflect his culture, as said by the devs themselves, and they give him some much needed darker tones to stand out against his rather bright color palette. They also are shockingly baggy compared to the rest of his appearance, which is tight and well kept. This could be for comfort, but it could also more likely be a reference to his culture. And lastly, his feet are about what you'd expect, if you were expecting mechanized barefoot look. Aside from the shock of him showing his grippers right out of the gate, his feet are actually very interesting, with the entire bottom pad of them being completely robotic. And after looking at his design and going through everything about him making this video, I came to the idea that maybe it's like this so that he can still be barefoot and have the naturalist aesthetic the game lists him as in the progression section, while not being prone to the pains that come with walking on the terrains that he does barefoot. If that's the case, then that's a really smart and good foresight in planning his design. However, there's a chance it is just coincidence, as minus the flower theming and his feet, nothing else about his character design screams naturalist, as he's well groomed and clean. And with that, that's Lifeweaver's design. His overall design works very well and has a lot of interesting small details or hints to his culture that otherwise would go unappreciated when playing as or against him in-game. The only part of his design that confuses me personally is the head tubes, as they don't really seem to suit any part of his aesthetic, as well as they seem to have no function. If you guys have theories or even just knowledge about them that I have overlooked, feel free to leave them in the comments, as I have no idea what these could mean or why they are included. Now you may be asking yourselves and me, why does this matter? Why look into Lifeweaver's design so closely? And to that I say it's because of how he's presented. Lifeweaver stands out as the first male identifying character to dress, act, and present himself in a more feminine or flamboyant manner compared to the other men on the roster. Remember how I mentioned Lifeweaver's chest earlier? Well, I brought that up because while he's not the first to expose his bare chest, with Doomfist, Hog, Junkrat, and Hanzo being the others on the top of my head to do so, he is the first to do so in a way that's visually appealing, almost seductive even, in a V-neck or even boob window fashion that you'd usually see on feminine designs in gaming. And while it seems odd at first, he not only wears it, but he rocks it while staying true to the masculine frame and identity he goes with. This, on top of the fact that Lifeweaver is openly pansexual and was upon his release, means that he is Overwatch's first pretty boy, but more importantly, he's Overwatch's first opportunity to make more feminine or stylized skins and cosmetics for a masculine frame. This makes Lifeweaver a key hero in expanding the diversity that Overwatch has onto its male roster, which is getting a bit old with how much of them look very samey. I mean, if you take a look at Reinhardt, Torbjorn, Doomfist, Hanzo, Genji, the list goes on. They all have very similar frames to another person on the roster, if not each other. So I look forward to the skins and future characters that Lifeweaver's edition will greenlight, seeing as this will add more body diversity to the group. The next thing is animations and particle effects. I want to go over these not just to expand on the points made above about Lifeweaver and how he's presented, but to also appreciate all the details put into this hero that who just gets boiled down to being a heal bot. Let's start with the easiest animation to see, being his idle animation, where he just flings around his healing blossom a bit and shows it off. It's nothing to write home about, but for what it is, there's a lot of effort put into it when he could have just shuffled a bit like the other heroes do. An animation that I love for both first and third person, though, was his weapon swap animation. Now, for some reason, his weapon swap in the animation in first person is a bit buggy. The animation that I love for both first and third person, though, was his weapon swap animation. Now, for some reason, his weapon swap in the animation in first person is a bit buggy, but you can still see the intensity behind the damage hand being sent out, where it shoots the needles out ready to fire, compared to the more relaxing and calm nature that the healing hand has when it's active. In third person, this calm and intense theming is actually enhanced by Lifeweaver's face and entire pose changing, showing anger and a bit of remorse for having to resort to violence while his damage arm is out, while looking much more relaxed and smiling while his healing hand is the one in command. This, I believe, is to imply that he would much rather heal than damage, as he prefers peace, but unlike a pacifist like Mercy, he's willing to resort to violence when necessary, rather than being hard against it. In third person as well, the intensity of swapping to the damage arm is very much on display, and I quite like that a lot. Looking into the arms more in depth, let's see what the healing arm has to offer in terms of animations. In the first person, the best animation for sure is watching the blossom go from 0 to full charge. It is very satisfying to see the flower bloom with healing energy and then almost radiate excitingly, waiting for it to be released onto someone. In third person, the animation isn't that bad, but it's kinda just looks like Lifeweaver is guarding his baby. However, in third person, the tossing animation for said healing arm is for sure the best for this, having such a graceful toss while Lifeweaver smiles, and when he finishes the toss like he's a mom at a beanbag throwing competition, his fingers fluidly flow before they fall along with his arm and slowly get back into a gentle and comfortable position. This animation makes me smile every time I see it in a third-person setting, and I really want others to appreciate it as much as I do. Damage-wise, things get a lot more interesting all around, with the stance of damage itself being prickly right away from the protruding thorns on the arms itself. In this stance, Lifeweaver, as mentioned before, is much more angry. While shooting, he gets that almost sad look in his eye, but he also overall has much more aggressive tones to his animations. And his best animations for each perspective show that. In first person, his best is his reload. It just has so much intensity behind it that I find it very satisfying to reload this weapon, and I find myself getting lost in the sound design on top of the actual animation playing, as it all just blends together so well. In third person, I quite like the act of shooting itself, as unlike in first person perspective, where he just yeets his palm forward, he actually angles his fingers purposefully, like he's using them as his guidance to aim with his thorns. I really wish they animated this in first person, as I really dislike the open palm, as it just gets in the way for such a nothing animation. The last noticeable thing to discuss on the animation frontier is the damage hand thorns depleting as Lifeweaver shoots both in third and first person. As Lifeweaver shoots his thorns, they actually get used up on his arm, and you see them slowly go back to the flat state like when the healing blossom is out until he reloads again. In first person, the thorns are much more gradually dissipate, while in third person, once the first one goes down, it's almost like they all follow way too soon. Though I understand why this is, it's such a minor thing that nobody will notice in-game that I'm shocked they even animated it in the first place. But I'm glad they did, as it shows good attention to detail. Moving on from the arms, we have the pedal platform itself, which animation is a thing that exists. The actual throwing animation itself in both first and third person is lackluster, but the actual platform itself is very nice. The particles when the platform is in the air is quite a good touch for something not really seen, while the bloom animation is quick and snappy. While I would have liked a more in-depth bloom animation, I understand speed is for having it actually be usable gameplay-wise, as too long animations make things take longer to activate, and thus it would make it be more useless. The platform rising looks the best, however, as you see the platform expands a bit, and the pink rockets propelling it upwards and making it hover are on display. The actual design of the pedal itself is like a lotus, but flat. It has a similar glass/texture to the floating pedals behind Lifeweaver himself, so maybe they are constructed to similar things. Overall, the pedal is probably the weakest in terms of Lifeweaver animation, with his arms anyway, but the actual platform itself looks great and has good particle effects to it. This is by far the worst animation in Lifeweaver's kit, at least in first person. It's so bad that I didn't even bother getting a clip of it. Basically just imagine speed lines to the Lifeweaver's perspective on the side of his face, and there you have it. That's his first person animation. Honestly, it's worse than Cassidy's roll, which at least dips down in first person to represent rolling. In third person, it's a decent bit more interesting. As you guys have been seeing, his pedals behind him glow yellow, implying that those are in fact his constructs, and that he's channeling healing through them to heal himself. But minus the lines and small pedals, that he does leave behind, it's not that stellar. Still pleasing to look at though on the rare occasion you see it, as you don't get to see this at all in first person, which is a shame. Lifeweaver's pole animation is very, very good, much better than I thought it was. He casts his arm out before lifting it up to the flower he created in the air, and then pulling back the ally he wishes to save. Going into this, I actually have never seen his pole animation in third person, and I can say for sure that's way better than I expected. Really good job on the animation team here. However, the most amazing part of the pole are the particles. The vine coming from the small flower at Lifeweaver's origin that link up to his ally, just to envelop them in a flower that surrounds them until they are pulled back with the shield of nature that keeps them alive. It's very beautiful to look at and very pleasing in-game when you do a clutch long-distance pull, as you get to see your artwork on display. The last animation of note to talk about relates to Lifeweaver's ultimate, the Tree of Life. The tree itself is probably my favorite thing in this entire video game. It being built, it pulsing, its small details, everything about it I love. Let's start by breaking down the animation of placing it though, before I start going on about the tree itself. In first person, while preparing to plant the tree, Lifeweaver holds the seed he's going to use to grow it in both hands, nurturing it almost as he finds a place to plant it. During this, you see a pink holographic image where the tree will be precisely located. It reminds me a lot of old Symmetra teleporter / shield generator and turrets, and in that regard, it's much more visually interesting. In third person, while preparing to place the tree, he actually has very different stance. Instead of holding a seed, he actually has his arms spread open, while healing emanates from his hands. I do think that this is substantially worse than the first person, but I assume that they didn't want him to hold the big seed in third person, as it would be very annoying to suddenly have that in the way for perhaps enemies, as the seed itself is bigger than what the actual model looks like when you're in first person, similar to how Symmetra's turrets are a lot bigger than you think they are. The act of actually planting the tree is the same in both, however. The first-person perspective shows it's the best, where of him raising his arms and raising the Tree of Life from the ground. It's good enough for what it wants to convey, however I do wish there was a little bit more flair put into it. Perhaps the seed itself would actually grow a little bit instead of just glowing yellow. Now onto the tree itself, a much more interesting topic. The tree has a lot of details that I feel go unnoticed by the untrained or unfocused eye. To start, when Lifeweaver plants the tree, it starts off yellow, tying in the initial burst heal it gives off when planted, as yellow means healing in the Overwatch language. As such, the pulses the tree gives out are also yellow, implying the healing there. When the tree is fully planted, it goes back to being pink, but still emanates the yellow waves for healing, as mentioned before. During this period, there are three main areas of interest on the tree that catch my eye. The very top of the tree, which looks like Lifeweaver's petal on the back when you look at it from the top. They're very similar in design and shape to the little backpack that Lifeweaver has, to the point where there's for sure a connection there. There's also a bigger version of the spinning flower that Lifeweaver holds in the tree itself, which I love a lot. And in the practice range, I find myself staring at it the most, as I enjoy seeing the spinning of it. It's very mesmerizing. Lastly, the last place of interest is the pulsing origin at the center of the tree itself, that has energy slowly build around it before exploding into the pulses that become the healing. It looks really nice, I just wish it was slightly more noticeable, but given how the tree is already very visually impairing in a game that's already filled with visual clutter, I can see why they toned it down. The tree also pulsates while it's active, showing that it is indeed alive, which given the explanation of I hope I was able to make you appreciate Lifeweaver's animations more during this, as that ends the segment about those. Overall, I wanted to talk about them because I noticed that Lifeweaver was skipped over in animation showcases and all that stuff when new characters usually get released, like with Overwatch 1 and Moira, and even Kiriko, and I believe Rom got one, but I did not see one for Lifeweaver, which is very sad given his beautiful status. Finally, let's move on to discussing Lifeweaver's gameplay and how he is very important to the overall roster, as he brings some new things to the table while also filling in a gap previously not seen by the support category since Mercy. Lifeweaver was designed to be a true support. What do you mean by that, you may be asking? All supports are, well, supports, right? Well, yes, but actually no. Overwatch has a huge issue in making supports effectively mini DPS or tank hybrids, especially the Overwatch 2 supports in Kiriko and Iari. And while I understand it's an FPS and it makes sense to make supports shoot, as that's part of the genre, at some point it's starting to feel like supports have become better DPS than the actual DPS, and have healing on the sidelines. Lifeweaver is the first true support we've gotten since Brig, or arguably even Ana, and on top of that, he's the first support hero since Mercy who actually does their supporting by enabling others, and in Lifeweaver's case, literally lifting up his team on a pedestal. As such, Lifeweaver is a very reactive support who relies on his high healing output and utility to win games, while dealing damage not totally reliant on his team, and can do his own share of damage with decent aim. But his abilities, while team-based, are not team-reliant. And in that regard, I view Lifeweaver as an upgraded Mercy to an extent, with Life Grip being a better res as you save your teammate while not putting yourself in danger. You have insane healing output that's way higher than Mercy while being as easy to apply as Mercy. And you also provide utility in repositioning and overhealth with your abilities and ult that can affect your whole team instead of just one person at a time. They even have equal survivability if both are using their positioning and cooldowns correctly, as I have had many games where my death count on both these heroes are below 3, and on Lifeweaver it's not uncommon for me to have 1 or even 0 deaths by the end of the game. So basically what this means is that Lifeweaver is a very supportive, in the actual meaning of the word, hero who helps his team with utility and heals rather than being an extra DPS hero, who has an insane amount of survivability and playmaking from the backline in exchange for minimal damage. This leads to conflicting opinions about him. There are many out there who think he is weak due to his minimal damage, since the state of Overwatch 2 and its support right now boils down to, do you do insane damage, healing, and survive everything? If so, you're good. If not, oh well, goodbye. While some think that he is OP, on the other end, by design due to having an immortality-based ability, while having easy-to-execute healing. This video isn't about if Lifeweaver is healthy or not in terms of balance, but rather the beauty of his character. And despite the complaints from both sides, it is of my opinion that they fail to see the reason and brilliance of Lifeweaver's inclusion to the game. Lifeweaver is another support who actually gives players a chance to help and support their team without wanting to play damage but healing edition, while still having the option to pitch in damage when necessary. His ease of access allows him to be picked up by anyone wanting to help their team, while his many intricacies and strategies that he can do with his team help differentiate the good players from the new ones. Not to mention that many people overlook when it comes to a hero like this and how they're designed. Lifeweaver is very handicap friendly. With easy healing, helpful abilities, and deployables, Lifeweaver is very well designed for players who may be impaired in some way, whether it be visually or perhaps even in their hands, where they can't play characters like Kiriko or BAP to their max effectiveness where they need a high APM. Beforehand, it was just Mercy and maybe Lucio, but now Lifeweaver joins the mix and adds a much-needed hero to those people who may need them. And I know myself a few people who can't play the more intensive heroes due to the limitations with their body or perhaps other things going on, and having characters like Lifeweaver allows them to enjoy the game that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. And still pitch in meaningful utility and viability to their team. Another thing to bring up about Lifeweaver is that he's very good at denying plays. And his playmaking is about that. It revolves around denying plays, and that leads to people's annoyance of him. As you've been seeing in the background, a lot of his plays involve pulling someone out of danger from being killed, or lifting people or himself out of dangerous situations. In that sense, Lifeweaver is like insurance. As long as his cooldowns are up and he's healing, you are most likely safe from a lot of things, especially with Tree of Life online. And while I understand the complaints, I would rather supports be designed like this and have them be proper supports, instead of having another Kiriko, BAP, or Yari. That's about it from me though. I hope that this was at least an interesting watch for you guys who stuck through it all. And of course, feel free to leave your own opinions in the comments below. I truly love this hero, and he's been my main since day one of his release, and has replaced my former main basically completely, as he's everything I wanted a support in Overwatch to be. And regardless of his place in the meta or viability, I genuinely think that he's one of the best and most beautifully designed things to come from Overwatch 2, and I hope his addition leads to more amazingly designed skins and heroes to come forward. And lastly, I hope that with this video people will no longer view Lifeweaver as just a troll hero and see him for what he truly is. And if you didn't get that, well, who's to say there isn't an art in trolling either? Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Sweet as. Sweet as. Sweet as.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Round 1. Capture the objective.